The cabin was supposed to be our escape, a quiet weekend in the Utah wilderness for me and Max, my dog. After a tough couple of months at work, I wanted peace. No emails, no meetings, just me and the crisp mountain air. Max was a good boy, a German shepherd with a thick coat and sharp, intelligent eyes. He was my shadow, always by my side. This trip was as much for him as it was for me. He loved the outdoors, and I loved watching him run through the woods, his tail wagging like a flag of pure joy. We arrived late in the afternoon, just as the sun was starting to dip behind the trees. The cabin was small but cozy, surrounded by thick forest on all sides. I unloaded the truck while Max explored, sniffing at every bush and tree. By the time the sun set, we were both tired. I built a fire, made some tea, and settled into the quiet. Max lay at my feet, his ears twitching at every crackle of the fire. I should have felt safe. But as the night deepened, an unease settled over me. The woods seemed too quiet, and shadows stretched further than they should. Max, usually calm, was alert. His ears perked, his body tense. He kept staring at the door. Sometime in the middle of the night, I woke up. It wasn't a gradual waking. It was sudden, like my body knew something was wrong before my mind did. The fire had burned down to embers, casting a faint orange glow across the room. Max wasn't at the foot of the bed where he usually slept. I sat up, heart thudding, and called his name. No response. Then I heard it, a soft scratching at the door. My first thought was Max, but something about the sound wasn't right. It was too slow, too deliberate. I got out of bed and grabbed the flashlight from the nightstand. The floorboards creaked under my feet as I approached the door. "Max?" I called again, my voice shaky. The scratching stopped. I opened the door a crack, shining the flashlight into the darkness. At first, I didn't see anything. Then Max stepped into the beam of light. Relief washed over me, but it was short-lived. He was standing strangely, his posture stiff, his head tilted at an odd angle. His eyes glinted in the light, but they didn't look like his eyes. They looked wrong. By morning, the tension from the night felt like a bad dream. Max was back to normal, or at least he seemed to be. He wagged his tail and licked my hand as I made coffee, his eyes bright and playful again. Still, I couldn't shake the feeling that something was off. When we went outside, Max didn't run like he usually did. Instead, he stayed close to me, his ears constantly swiveling toward the woods. As the day went on, strange things started happening. I found paw prints in the dirt around the cabin, but they weren't Max's. They were larger, with claws that dug deep into the earth. Max noticed them too. He sniffed at them, then growled, a low, rumbling sound I'd never heard from him before. That evening, as the sun dipped low, I heard something out in the woods. A faint, high-pitched whistle, like someone calling for a dog. Max froze. His ears perked, and he let out a sharp bark, staring into the trees. "Stay here," I whispered, gripping his collar. My heart was racing. The whistle came again, closer this time. That night I couldn't sleep. Max stayed by the door, his body tense, his growls low and constant. Around midnight, the whistling started again. This time it was right outside the cabin. I grabbed the flashlight and a knife from the kitchen. Max growled louder, his fur standing on end. When I opened the door, I saw something that froze me in place. It looked like Max. Same size, same fur, same intelligent eyes. But it wasn't him. Its movements were jerky, unnatural, like it was learning how to use a body it didn't belong in. Max stepped forward, placing himself between me and the creature. The two of them stared at each other, and for a moment, I thought they were going to attack. But then the creature did something I'll never forget. It smiled. Its mouth stretched impossibly wide, revealing sharp, yellowed teeth. And then it mimicked my voice. "Max, come here." The sound was flat, wrong, like a recording played on an old machine. I slammed the door and bolted it, my hands shaking. I didn't sleep for the rest of the night. I sat by the door with Max, gripping the knife and listening to the sounds outside. By dawn, the noises stopped. I packed up the truck as fast as I could, Max sticking close to my side. As we drove away, I glanced in the rearview mirror. For a moment, I thought I saw it, a figure standing in the tree line, watching us. When we got home, Max was different. He was quieter, more subdued. Sometimes I catch him staring at me, his head tilted, his eyes unreadable. I love my dog. But sometimes I wonder if the one I brought home from the cabin is really him. After months of feeling lonely in my tiny apartment, I decided to get a dog. It wasn't an impulsive decision. I'd been thinking about it for a while. My friends told me a pet would help with the silence, give me a reason to get outside more. I went to the shelter on a rainy Saturday. It was loud, chaotic, dogs barking, tails wagging, volunteers bustling back and forth. I wandered down the rows of kennels, but none of the dogs really clicked with me. Then I saw him. In the last kennel sat a sleek black Labrador mix, his coat shiny and his eyes deep brown, almost human in their intensity. He didn't bark or jump up at the cage like the others. He just sat there, calm, watching me with a curious tilt of his head. When the volunteer opened the kennel door, the dog walked right up to me, nuzzled my hand, and wagged his tail. That was it. I named him Charlie and took him home that day. At first, everything was great. Charlie adjusted quickly to the apartment. He loved our daily walks and seemed to understand me in a way I couldn't quite explain. But after a few weeks, I started noticing little things that didn't add up. Charlie was too smart. I know that sounds strange, but it was the little things. He knew when I was about to take him for a walk, even before I grabbed his leash. He seemed to anticipate my mood, nuzzling me when I was upset or keeping his distance when I needed space. But the part that unsettled me the most was how he would watch me. Sometimes I'd be cooking dinner or working on my laptop, and I'd look up to find Charlie sitting across the room, staring. Not wagging his tail, not begging for attention, just watching, his eyes unblinking. At night, it was worse. I'd wake up to find him sitting at the foot of my bed, his eyes reflecting the faint glow of the streetlights outside. It wasn't like he was guarding me. It felt more like he was studying me. "Charlie, go lie down," I'd say, and he'd obey. But I always felt his eyes on me as I drifted back to sleep. One night, I woke to a strange sound, a soft scratching, like nails on wood. I turned on the light, heart pounding. Charlie was sitting by the bedroom door, staring at it intently, his ears twitching. "What is it, boy?" I whispered. But he didn't move. His focus was laser sharp, like he was listening to something I couldn't hear. A few nights later, something happened that I still can't explain. It was late, and I was half asleep on the couch. Charlie was lying nearby, his head resting on his paws. Suddenly, he shot up, his ears perked and his body rigid. "Charlie?" I said, sitting up. He growled, a deep, guttural sound I'd never heard from him before. His fur bristled as he stared at the front door. I froze. The door was locked, the chain in place. But Charlie's growl turned into barking, loud and frantic. He lunged at the door, scratching and barking like he was trying to keep something out. My heart was racing. I grabbed my phone and crept toward the door, half expecting to see someone on the other side. But when I looked through the peephole, the hallway was empty. "Charlie, stop!" I said, pulling him back. He resisted, his growls turning into whines. But eventually, he settled down. I double-checked the locks and went to bed, but I couldn't shake the feeling that something had been outside. The next day, I told a coworker about what had happened. She joked that Charlie might be seeing a ghost or sensing something supernatural. I laughed it off, but her comment stuck with me. That night, as I was scrolling through my phone, I came across an article about animals and paranormal activity. It was full of stories about dogs barking at nothing, cats staring at empty corners, pets acting as if they could see things humans couldn't. I looked at Charlie, who was lying on the rug, chewing his favorite toy. He looked up at me, tilting his head as if he knew exactly what I was reading. That's when it hit me. Charlie always seemed to know what I was thinking. He wasn't just a smart dog, he was something else. I started to test him, asking questions as if he could answer. "Are you hungry?" I'd ask, and he'd wag his tail before I even got up to feed him. "Do you want to go for a walk?" He'd grab his leash before I touched it. One night, as a joke, I said, "Charlie, are you something else?" He stopped chewing his toy and looked at me. His eyes, those deep, human-like eyes, held mine for a moment too long. Then he tilted his head and barked once, sharp and clear, almost like a laugh. Since that night, I've started to notice more things. The way Charlie seems to anticipate not just my actions, but my thoughts. The way he sometimes stands by the window, staring out as if waiting for something, or someone. I love him. He's still my dog, still my Charlie. But sometimes late at night, when I catch him watching me, I can't help but wonder, what did I bring home from that shelter?